Glastonbury Tor, one of the most bizarre looking sights you'll see from any direction around in the landscape, and almost seemingly any height as well. It also contains a really bizarre feature, one to this day that nobody really understands. So what exactly is that feature? Well, I've driven past this place hundreds of times, but I've never had the pleasure of walking up it. You can see it from miles around. Let's go take a look. Now, if you even have the remotest of knowledge of Glastonbury Tor, you'll also be aware of the countless myths and legends surrounding this place. But you'll also be aware that's not really what we do on this channel. What we're here to do today is to unveil the mystery that has puzzled antiquarians of old and scholars of today. What exactly are these terraces for, and why have we misunderstood them over the years? From any light, any direction, any elevation, Glastonbury Tor stands out, largely because of the patterned terraces around the outside. And if you look from above, it very much feels like there is a pattern, or maybe even a deliberate pathway to the top of this seemingly mythical place. Or perhaps defensive earthworks from an Iron Age, when ring defensive structures were in high demand. Of course, this transcends very quickly into myths and legends, the shape seemingly representing something. But as I say, we aren't here for any of that. We are here for some logic, maybe some science, maybe some archaeology, to tell you exactly what those patterns are. I hope. Well, we're nearly at the top of the Tor, and already you can see view for miles, and you can see why the myths and the legends sort of creep into this place. It's quite something. Up that way you've got the mendips and the hills, you've got the Somerset Levels to the west there, and if I spin you right round where you've got Dorset and beyond, you've probably got Wiltshire in that direction. Not sure how far you can see, probably not that far on a grey day like today. Crack on to the top. We're actually sat on a lump of rock called Midford Sands, part of Bidford Sands strata, and that has acted as a cap here, which essentially is what has stopped this feature from eroding away like its surroundings. Now, with that in mind, the first question, perhaps this is a natural geological feature, a remnant of millions of years of erosion. A geological study 20 years ago told us that that theory was not the case. Absolutely, in no uncertain terms, these patterns were caused by human activity. What human activity would cause such patterns and the need to make these patterns on this landscape? Now, archaeological evidence for life here spans way back into the Stone Age. A Neolithic arrowhead was found here, but we then have Roman material, none of which indicated actual settlement. But then comes the first puzzle. We have post-Roman pottery that was made in Turkey, found on the Tor. I don't think we'll ever know the context of those items, but we do know we have people here for thousands of years, hunting, trading, worshipping, all the general people kind of stuff. Okay, so let's get down to business. Let's work out what these patterns were for, who made them and why. And you never know, we might learn a little bit around the landscape as well as we go. Well, we can start with the Neolithic because we know they were here. The arrowhead gives a little bit away. Perhaps they were hunting at the very least, even if they weren't living here. Perhaps they saw this place as a place of worship and maybe a route to the gods, the pathway that zigzagged around this site. Okay, so with regards to Neolithic people, there's probably not a lot else we can glean from the Tor itself. We start to need to look out into the landscape, and over there to the west we have the Somerset Levels, and there's one particular place quite breathtaking which may help us piece together the puzzle back here. So if you ever fancy a Neolithic day out, well, this is the place to come. Avalon Marshes here in Somerset, on the Somerset Levels. Up there is a sort of a visitor centre, really good, tells you loads of information about this area. Now, back in the Neolithic times, the early Neolithic, well, this was all salt water. We're only sort of 20 miles away from the Bristol Channel, and we're only a very 1 or 2 metres above sea level, and at that point, well, this slowly turned to freshwater as the Neolithic period moved forward. Now, if I can find it this time, there's something I want to show you. I couldn't find it last time I came, it was really frustrating. Little sign there, the Sweet Track. Now, the Sweet Track is a Neolithic trackway, simple as that. It was found in the 1970s by someone called Ray Sweet, hence the name, and he dated this trackway, this levelled trackway, wooden trackway using dendrochronology, and dated it to 3807 BC. Very specific, but you can do that stuff with tree dating. And even before we get there, the biggest treat of all is the view ahead of me now. A walkway through these trees, just an absolutely magical view. And I remember this from last time, but I've got a few more clues as to how to find the sweet track. Let's go take a look. So nearly 6,000 years ago, the Neolithic were making walkways in this area, moving across the dangerous marshes here on the Somerset Levels, weaving their way across the levels from bank to bank, island to island. Right, another sign, sweet track. Let's see if we can find it this time. So if you think about why this area was good for life, because it seems pretty inhospitable to me on the face of it, but when this turned from saltwater to freshwater, well, I guess we have fish and we have an abundance of resources to build homes, trackways, and of course with that in mind, well, we probably have a lot of safety too, because this isn't exactly the place where you and your clan are going to be attacked from outsiders. This is as good as any hill fort as I can imagine. And of course, speaking of the islands, well, as we cast our view back towards Glastonbury Tor, well, maybe that was the biggest island of them all, that all of these trackways around here would have connected in this seemingly unhospitable marshland. So perhaps that was the only link between the Neolithic people here and Glastonbury Tor up there, that of the view. Well, pollen samples from the time suggested that the Tor itself was covered in dense woodland, so there was clearly no desire for the Neolithic people to carve pathways or routeways up in a wonderful pattern of the Tor that we see today. The Neolithic people obviously had everything they needed right here on the marshes, and I'm still yet to find the sweet track, despite signs telling us we're on the sweet track. I'm looking for the reconstruction to show you how cool it is, and there's nothing. And in fact, here's a sign saying this is a replica of the Mere Heath trackway made around 1500 BC. So they were here for a very long time, 2,000 or 3,000 years making trackways, but we are yet to find the sweet track reconstruction. So perhaps we need to move forward in time to try and unravel this mystery. Now, the mystery of where the sweet track reconstruction is that I wanted to show you shall remain for another day, frustratingly. Today's story, the patterns on Glastonbury Tor and what they were for, well, that can be unravelled perhaps by myth, folklore and legend. Now, you know I always stray away from that. We prefer science and fact and logic. But perhaps that can help us understand the way that people think and understand the way that people might sell stuff, and explain what I mean. So what do we have here at Glastonbury? Well, we have the Glastonbury Tor, and we have a 5th to 7th century occupation here, the Dark Ages. Nothing to prove the existence of Arthur type character, despite the legend of Arthur being set in that period. We have a church, St Michael's, built here in the 1300s, surviving until 1539. That's kind of it really, but we do have a theory. We just need to head to Glastonbury Abbey to find out a bit more. 1184, and there was a significant fire here at the old church, a then wooden structure burnt to the ground. And if you don't have a church, well, then you don't really get your pilgrim traffic. So the monks here, well, they needed a solution to this problem. Now, the monks already knew of the works of Geoffrey of Monmouth. Now, 50 years or so prior to this, Geoffrey of Monmouth had written a tale, Historia Regum Britannia, a fictional tale of kings of Britain. Now, at the time and for the next 500 years, this was believed to be entirely accurate. Now, the good monks, well, they were very clever, and they saw opportunity here with this book. They found a suitable grave in the abbey and proclaimed, "We have the body of Arthur and a blonde lady." News travelled far and wide, and not only did the pilgrims return, but the money did too. So that myth has been put to bed. No sign of Arthur, just the monks using some clever ideas to get the money and the pilgrims back in. Certainly no terraces or defensive structures to talk of. Absolutely nothing from that time. So back to the monks, but maybe 300 years or so further on, In the 1500s, in fact, the abbey here at Glastonbury was the single wealthiest in the entire country. The monks managed a lot of estates and land surrounding Glastonbury. But money is one thing, one very important thing, but the ability to grow food, well, that's another ballgame altogether. Now, we already know the monks are pretty sharp. They needed land, and they were said to have drained the entire Somerset Levels using a number of embankments and canals throughout the landscape. An absolutely monumental task. Now, this would have been ideal pasture land once they'd done it, not so much arable, so that's when we need to consider what else we have to fill that need. So here, back at the Tor, well, the levels that way are just part of the story. Look every direction around us, you can see wetlands for miles, and maybe that gives us our most plausible reason of all, because arable land is very scarce around here. So instead of the myths and the legends creating defensive ditches, instead of mysterious patterns and pathways leading up to the sacred land, and instead of these shapes and patterns depicting things, perhaps we have the monks once again being incredibly practical with the land they have. We have a not insignificant arable plot of land here. The monks using every inch they have to grow the crops they needed. I think folklore and myth and legend does have its place in our society, but for me it's the real tangible stories, the physical feats of engineering. Even back then, the knowledge to drain 200 square miles of wetland to plant certain crops, so they knew what to plant in those lands, and then to come here and carve your way into this monumental hill to again maximise a yield of crops. Well, those stories then shape the folklore and the legend that sticks with us today. You know, if you've liked this video and you want to know more about the history of the landscape, well then click on subscribe below. We'd love you to do that. And of course we do have a Patreon as well. If you want to support this channel, you can click on the join button below or click on the link in the description for the Patrons. We'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.